My name is Marcell Hansen, and you're listening to Small Habits, Big Changes. Let's dive in. Good day. Today, I was hoping to share a story that I think at the end will come around to being insightful as it was for me. As of late, I was working with, we'll call him Dave. There's a million Daves out there, so keep some anonymity for him, one of my guys. And Dave is a masterful builder. He can build anything out of wood, make it functional, look good. He has a impeccable eye for scale and the sweet spot balance between yin and yang. And if you've ever walked by or driven by someone's house and seen their deck or seen a front porch or a fence and when like, ooh, that's a good looking fence. That's what I'm talking about. Like fences that are functional, of course, always first is functional, but a very close second is aesthetically pleasing. So this is quintessential Dave. He can build anything, though he's modest. And if he ever hears this, he would probably be embarrassed. He's really quite skillful. He's an old school, sensible, logical, got a wicked handle on physics and can do anything. I love him dearly for that. So we're building the fence. I've worked with Dave for many years now. And little backstory is last year he was in an accident, ended up spending time in the hospital, and as a result of a procedure, got to take home a blind spot in one of his eyes. Now it's gotten better and the blind spot's gotten smaller. For the most part, he, functions very well. He's still able to drive. It's pretty minuscule. Yet as a builder, anyone who knows building decks and fences and stairs, you're reading a tape quite a bit. So tapes have little lines on them, measuring tapes, usually 16 little dashes for the 16ths. They could have just eighths. Most old school tapes might just have the quarter hashes or just the eighth and the quarter hashes and the halves. But regardless, you're reading, at arm's distance away sometimes, and numbers are pretty important. The whole measure twice, cut once definitely applies. But with this small little fault in his eye, he remarked more than a few times throughout the week how annoying it was. And he would have to triple check, the number and kind of blink and give a little bit different perspective, little angle on the tape to make sure he was reading it right. And at one point he said this is bugging me. And I said, what's that? And he said, the blind spot. And I said, just came out. I said, at least you have one. You're aware of it. And to myself, I thought we all have blind spots, maybe not literal ones, like where our brain is not filling in the gap of the camera, the viewer that is our eyes. It could apply to any senses, hearing, sight, touch, smell, taste. And I'd reckon that we all have some blind spots. I thought in that moment that Dave's awareness of having one brought a ton of value to me. It was illuminating, had me think for a second, where might I have a blind spot? And so I invite you to look yourself and ask yourself, where might you have a blind spot? Something that you've trained yourself to do, something that may have happened as a trauma in the past, where you have an energetic blind spot. Now, along with this, I'm reminded of a conversation that I heard recently. I think it was an interview with Stephen Bartlett on Diary of a CEO. Highly recommend. He was speaking with an ex-CIA agent who was talking about perspective and perception and why people struggle so much, I think, in communication. And I think he relayed this as well in relationships, in sales, when you have a client and you are selling, or you have a partner and you are trying to convince them of your perspective. Maybe it's parenting and you're trying to convince your child of your perspective. Perspective is meant to just be yours. That's it. I've always thought that was a superpower, my perspective. And what I realize is my perspective is that I have more of a perception than a perspective in many instances. Let me try it from my perspective, how I could maybe explain it. Like I'm sitting here in this chair looking at a camera talking into a microphone, I can't see what's directly behind me. My perspective cannot, though if I look into my screen, I actually can because I have a camera viewing that. But in general, my perspective is this. This is what I see. This is what I see. Some people see this. Some, very, very narrow for those of you who are not on YouTube. Some people see a little bit broader. Some people see 180 degrees. And some people take the time to really look around and take in a little bit more, 360 degrees maybe. But it's still from my perspective, my eyes viewing in a certain direction, what I see. Now, my perspective comes from my vision in my brain, but it also comes with previous emotions, previous experiences stacked on top of one another, previous perhaps traumas, or even from childhood or adulthood that are coagulated into my mental framework that influence my perspective. And that right there is proven in the statistics that have run for decades of how poorly people perform when it comes to an eyewitness. Someone's robbing a bank, and they ask the customers or the clients in the lobby what they look like. Very poorly. Not even like 20 to 30% of physical markers are identifiably correct. People experience trauma, they're experiencing panic, they're experiencing limbic response. They might have all the history of their past put into that perspective. Humans in general are very, very weak in the department of differentiation and identification. So, perception, on the other hand, is sort of taking in all of what can be happening right here. Like if there was someone else in the room, conceiving their perspective as well as where they are spatially, what's going on around me, below, above. If someone were to walk in the door, which is to my right, what that would be like, the windows to my left, if someone were washing them from the outside. So it's not that your perspective is wrong. Understand, and please hear me, that it's more that your perspective is just your own. And inviting someone to empathize or see what you see is fine. However, understanding that it's virtually impossible for someone to see things the same as you when there's so much emotion and feeling and bias and subjectivity wrapped into that. So wanting better communication and to improve relations in general, whether it's with a sibling or a friend or a partner or a child or a coworker or a superior in the workplace, think about taking your perspective and putting it on the shelf and maybe being a fly on the wall. I think at some point in our lives, each of us have wanted to be a fly on the wall in some circumstance. Imagine you're a fly on the wall and what you're seeing objectively, assuming flies can be objective, is what's going on. Like that's more of a reality that someone else can buy into. It's objective, it is logical, it makes sense. If it's accurately told, there's very little place for someone to really stumble and be stuck in not understanding because it's logically what happened. It doesn't have your feelings, emotions, experiences, biases rolled into it. Perception is far more logical, far more objective, far more responsive to what's going on as opposed to reactive to what's going on. We react because we carry around a plethora of factors that influence what we see, hear, touch, and understand. Walt Whitman said to be curious, not judgmental. I feel like if we can hold that quote from Walt in our psyche somewhere, we can extract an experience and enjoyment from our own perspective. A lot of our history and a lot of our upbringing make things pleasant and make things joyous and thrilling even to experience. We don't want to strip that away, but at the same time, we can question ourselves to say, now what else could be going on here from a different perspective or from a larger canopy of viewing into the experience. Just food for thought. It's interesting that it came up, seeing Dave with a blind spot and then saying and thinking that we all have blind spots was the impetus to it. And then hearing more about perspective versus perception. And really, if you have the opportunity to check out that episode at Diary of CEO, it was fantastic. I enjoyed it very much. And again, thank you for spending your time with today's episode. If you got any gold, any insight, any spark of inspiration, if it heightened your awareness in any way, shape, or form, I encourage you to share it with a friend or someone you love that may also find value in it. We have a free wellness texting community that you can send in questions. You can send in your wins. You can send in something that you want to hear expounded upon. The texting number is in the outro. So hang on just a minute and listen there. And you will hear it. You can text yes to 206-483-2960. And we are into the last week of winter. So we're getting ready to shift. Again, we like to shift with the seasons. It's very natural for our body to come out of a more dormant stage, of a more reflective stage, more introverted journaling. Maybe you wrote your book this winter. Now we're getting into spring. Spring is for action. This is where we start to see the fruits of our labor. We start to see what we planted seeds on in last year. So if you're not seeing those start to pop up, remember that today, what you experience, those are the planted seeds that you took time on 6, 9, 12 months ago. So if you don't like what you're seeing in this spring's garden, then you know that you're at agency. You can decide to plant new seeds and watch your future harvests come up. I wish you all the best this week. Until we meet again, stay awesome. Thank you so much for listening today. If you feel any part of this episode resonated with you, then please consider sharing it with a friend who may also find value in it. And remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And before you go, did you know we have a fantastic free text community? If you want more bite-sized health hacks and reminders delivered directly to your phone, absolutely free, then text keyword YES to 206-483-2960. Again, that's keyword YES to 206-483-2960. And we'll see you on the inside.